It happened a long time ago, when I was a college student, a time when I was young, passionate, and dreamy. At that time, I only focused on studying, friends, and the simple joys of life. But then something happened that I could not forget. Now when everything is far away, I want to share this story, hoping to bring something meaningful to those who are listening. Let's go back to that time with me. My name is Olivia. I live in California, a place that everyone dreams of visiting at least once in their life. This city is not only famous for its beautiful beaches, bright sunshine all year round, but also for being the center of creativity, opportunity, and big dreams. Hollywood, the birthplace of classic movies, is right here, a symbol of success and fame. I always feel proud to have grown up in such a modern and poetic setting, where every corner and every road brings a sense of vitality and life. At that time I had just turned 18, had just finished high school, and entered university. It was a new threshold, a journey that I expected would help me discover myself, learn and mature. However, my life before that was not as peaceful as it seemed. I could call myself a good student, but in fact, I lived under the pressure of my family's expectations throughout my childhood and teenage years. Especially my father, who always put a lot of faith in me, was also the strictest. My family did not lack anything materially. We lived in a spacious house with full amenities. From the outside, many people thought I was lucky to live in a dream family. But inside that wall, I knew clearly that my family was not as happy as it seemed. My father always wanted me to achieve what he considered the standard of success. He not only wanted me to be good at school, but also to be the best, to always be at the top of the class and above all the other kids. If I did not do well in school or did not get good grades, he would not hesitate to punish me. Those punishments were not beatings, but harsh scoldings, disappointed looks, and sometimes coldness that lasted for days. That scared me so much that I always tried to study hard, not because I wanted to, but because I had to avoid my father's anger. Throughout my elementary and middle school years, my grades were always at the top of the class. Every time I achieved excellent results, my parents bragged to relatives and friends, as if to prove that I was their pride. I still remember clearly the evenings when the whole family sat together. My father held up my report card, read out each number, and proudly said, "My daughter always comes first." But to me, each compliment was like a reminder that I was not allowed to fail. I did not feel happy or satisfied every time I came first, but only felt relieved that I had passed another test without disappointing my father. That feeling of pressure followed me every day, like an inseparable shadow. During my high school years, my life almost revolved around studying. While my friends spent time participating in extracurricular activities, going out or exploring personal interests, I often sat in the classroom until late at night, absorbed in homework and books. I didn't dare complain, nor did I dare show my fatigue, because I knew that if my father saw, he would sternly remind me to try harder. His words, although simple, to me were like knives cutting deep into my self-esteem. "Others can do it, why can't I?" That sentence became an obsession in my mind, making me not dare to relax even a little. I longed for a break, to live a more relaxed life, but the fear of criticism and disappointment kept me stuck in the vortex of studying. When I entered university, I thought that all the pressure would be lighter. No longer living near my parents, no longer under my father's close supervision, I hoped to feel freer, less burdened in my mind. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly. My grades were still very good, even at the top of my class. In particular, I always excelled in my core subjects, especially mathematics, a subject that I was highly regarded for since my high school years. My lessons always ended with compliments from the lecturer, and that helped me temporarily forget about my worries about my father's expectations. However, things began to change at the end of the first semester. The final exam in math, the subject I was most proud of, did not bring the expected results. I only got a fair grade, not the perfect score I was used to receiving. Although it was just a test, it was a shock to me. Mr. Noah, the math teacher, was a man in his 50s, known for being strict but dedicated. He always demanded neatness and perfection in his students' work, and I thought I would never let him down. I had always been the top student in his class, someone he often mentioned as a shining example for others to follow. But this time, I failed to get the perfect score. When he returned the test, Mr. Noah did not seem angry or disappointed as I feared. Instead, he called me back and said gently, "Olivia, sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. That's life. The important thing is that you tried your best. Don't be too upset about it." His voice was warm, like a father comforting his child. Mr. Noah always encouraged his students to look at failure positively, but his words did not ease the anxiety in my heart. To others, this might have been just a test, but to me, it meant a lot. I knew that when my father heard the news, he would not see it the way Mr. Noah did. To him, a less than perfect score meant failure. On the way home that day, I kept thinking about his reaction. What would he say? How disappointed would he be? In my imagination, his angry eyes seemed to be following my every move. I had lived my whole life under his expectations, and I had never dared to disappoint him. I felt my throat tighten, my breathing became heavy at the thought of reporting this result to him. My father was a strict man, and I knew that I would not be able to avoid the reproaches, even the cold gaze that I feared most in the world. That fear gradually became an obsession, to the point that I could not think clearly. In a state of confusion and pressure, I made a bold decision that now, thinking back, I dare not believe was true. That night, after tossing and turning in my room, I decided to meet Mr. Noah at his home to ask to change the test results, no matter what the cost. It was a reckless decision, but I could think of no other way. I searched for his address through the lecturer information book that I knew in the school library. When the clock struck 10 o'clock at night, I left the dormitory, my heart filled with anxiety. Questions kept ringing in my head. Will the teacher understand me? Will he accept my plea? But at the same time, I was haunted by the anger and disappointment in my father's eyes if he knew about this. I was trembling and confused all the way to the teacher's house, but I did not stop. When I reached the front door, I took a deep breath, feeling my chest being pressed by anxiety. My hands trembled as I knocked lightly on the wooden door, each sound echoing in the quiet night. A moment later the door opened, and Mr. Noah appeared. He was wearing a warm brown sweater, the light from inside the house shining out, highlighting his stern, but somewhat gentle face. He looked at me, a little surprised. "Olivia, why are you here so late?" His voice was gentle, but still maintained his usual calm. I bowed my head, a feeling of shame and fear weighing heavily on my chest. He paused for a few seconds, then opened the door wide, inviting me into the house. "Come in. It's cold outside," he said, his voice calm. I hesitantly stepped in, my eyes darting around to see the space inside. The small house was neat. The soft yellow light made me feel warmer in the dark night. However, what caught my attention most was the strange silence. There was no sound except our footsteps on the wooden floor. I turned to him and asked cautiously, "Do you live alone?" The teacher nodded slightly, closed the door behind me, and said, "Yes, I live alone. My wife passed away many years ago, and my son is abroad." His voice was low, but it did not show much emotion. After listening, I felt even more pressured, as if the silence in this house was stirring up my unease. The teacher led me into the living room. A gray fabric sofa was neatly placed next to a large bookshelf filled with math books and teaching materials. The teacher gestured for me to sit down and asked, "Why are you here at this hour? Is something wrong?" I sat on the edge of the sofa, my hands clasped together, my palms cold. The feeling of tension made me not know where to start. Finally, after a few seconds of regaining my composure, I spoke, my voice trembling. Teacher, I really don't know what to do. The results of the final math test. I didn't get the maximum score. I paused, my throat tightening as I recalled what had haunted me for the past few days. He sat down in the chair opposite me, his eyes patiently looking at me. I continued, my voice getting softer. Up until now, I have always had the highest scores in your class, but this time I failed. My father always had high expectations for me. He won't accept this. I don't know how to face him. I bowed my head, feeling tears welling up, but I tried to stay calm. I'm scared, teacher. My father is very strict. I can't bear to disappoint him. That's why I came to you for advice. Mr. Noah didn't say anything, just listened silently. After I finished speaking, the room fell into a suffocating silence. Mr. Noah sat there, his hands clasped together, his eyes fixed on me thoughtfully. I bowed my head, a feeling of anxiety engulfing me, wondering if my plea would move him. A moment later he let out a soft sigh, a sigh that carried both sympathy and sadness, but also contained something I couldn't quite place. The teacher leaned back in his chair, his eyes stopping on me, as if he was considering something very important. A smile appeared on his lips, but it was not the familiar gentleness I had seen when he lectured. On the contrary, it made me feel uneasy, as if something was waiting ahead. Then he spoke, calmly but clearly. Each word seemed to emphasize, Olivia, you came here so late. I thought you were very determined. But unfortunately the scores have been updated by me, and cannot be changed anymore. Those words felt like a hammer blow, hitting me straight in the heart. The fragile hope that I had held tightly in my heart, since deciding to come here regardless of everything, suddenly vanished like dust. I raised my head, my heart pounding, my lips trembling as I said, it's been updated. I repeated his words, as if I couldn't believe it. Teacher, is there no other way, please, teacher? He lifted me, his eyes unwavering, his voice still calm but full of authority. The scores have been entered into the system, Olivia. Procedure is procedure. What else do you think I can do? The teacher's words seemed to add fuel to the fire of panic in my heart. I could no longer control myself. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I knelt down before him, my hands clenched tightly, and I begged, teacher, please, please help me just this once. I can't go home with this result, my father. He won't accept it, teacher. I'm willing to do anything, just so you can help me increase my score. The teacher's eyes were still cold, looking at me without leaving, as if he wanted to examine my every word. His eyebrows furrowed slightly, as if to show some hesitation, but I didn't give up. I continued to plead, my voice choked, tears rolling down my cheeks. Teacher, I can't bear my father's disappointment. He's very strict. I'll do anything, as long as the result is changed. The teacher sat in silence for a while longer, the atmosphere becoming so stifling that I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. Finally he sighed softly, placed his hands on the table, and said slowly, actually, there is still a way. His words seemed to light a fire in me. I raised my head immediately, my eyes shining with hope, but also with a hint of uncertainty. I did not dare to interrupt, just looked at him attentively, waiting for what he would say next. He continued, his voice even but clear, but this method is not acceptable to everyone. I am not sure if you are ready or not. Without a second of hesitation, I replied immediately, my voice urgent but determined, teacher, no matter what the price is, I will accept it. I just need to change the outcome. His eyes stared at me, as if piercing through the outer shell to look straight into my heart, where fear and despair were rising fiercely. A smile appeared on his lips, a smile with a strange quality that I could not explain. He leaned forward, his voice low, each word filling the heavy space of the room. Okay, Olivia, but listen carefully. because this could change your life. I froze, all my senses shutting down. I couldn't speak, I could only look at him. As soon as his words left my mouth, I froze. "Oh, Lydia, are you willing to trade your closeness to me?" Time seemed to stop, space seemed to constrict. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. The words rang out clearly, each word like a sharp knife stabbing into my mind. I sat motionless, my trembling hands clutching the hem of my shirt, my empty eyes staring ahead. The air in the small room suddenly became thick, as if all the oxygen had been drained. What do you mean?" I stammered, my voice choking in my throat. I didn't dare look him straight in the eyes, afraid that his eyes would confirm what I was thinking. He leaned forward, his hands on the table. His voice was low but heavy, each word adding pressure to the already tense atmosphere. "You know exactly what that means, Olivia. This is the only way to change the outcome you want, but I won't force you. The decision is yours." I felt cold, as if I had just been submerged in icy water. I understood what he said, but I couldn't accept it. Despair, fear, and shame seemed to mix together, swirling around my mind. I bowed my head, my thoughts in chaos. In my ears echoed the teacher's words, cold and decisive, leaving no way out. I thought of my father. His expectant eyes, his harsh scoldings whenever I failed to meet his standards. I remembered every moment my father bragged about my achievements to relatives and friends, as if I was the only proof of the family's success. If the results, this time, were not as expected, how disappointed would he be? I imagined his cold eyes, his harsh words that always made me feel small and weak. My chest tightened, I was cornered with no way out. The teacher's words were the only door I could see, but going through that door meant I had to make a trade-off that I never thought I would have to do. "Teacher," I looked up, my eyes red, my voice trembling, but filled with determination. "If I agree, will you guarantee to change my score?" The teacher looked at me, his eyes cold, but no less certain. He nodded, his voice clear. "I will do it. But remember, this is your choice. No one is forcing you." His answer seemed to confirm what I had feared since I entered this house. I bowed my head, my hands clenched, my nails digging into my palms. I knew this was not the right thing to do. I knew I would regret it, but the pressure on my shoulders made it impossible to think clearly. I took a deep breath, as if trying to gather the last bit of courage left in me. Everything around me seemed to disappear, leaving only the pounding of my heart. Under the pressure, fear and despair, I made a decision that, when I thought about it, I still couldn't believe I had made. I raised my head, my lips pressed together, and nodded slightly. I didn't say another word, because I knew that anything I said at that moment would only reveal my weakness more clearly. The teacher looked at me, his eyes still cold, but a faint smile flashed across them. I didn't know if it was a smile of satisfaction or pity. But at this moment, that didn't matter anymore. I had made my choice, and I had to face it. I agreed. When I nodded to the teacher, I felt like my whole world had suddenly turned upside down. That night, the teacher and I were close to each other. Everything happened in a heavy atmosphere, without intimacy or warmth, just a cold exchange that I forced myself to accept. All night, I felt lost, all my emotions mixed up, shame, fear, but also despair. When it was all over, I could only bow my head, quickly put on my clothes, and leave the teacher's house, my heart heavy beyond description. The next morning, I returned to the dormitory exhausted. I felt like I was no longer myself. My eyes were puffy from lack of sleep, but the first thing I did when I sat down at my desk was turn on my computer, log into the school system to check my score. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking as I clicked the mouse to see the results. And then, the results appeared before my eyes. My score had changed, just as the teacher had promised. I breathed a sigh of relief, but that relief was quickly replaced by an unfillable feeling of emptiness. I felt like a ghost for the rest of the day. When I got to class, I felt everyone's eyes on me. Whispers started to ring out as the test results were announced. My score was a big surprise to everyone, because before that, I had not achieved the results I expected. Some of my friends looked at me with doubtful eyes. A few others kept asking questions. I tried to keep my cool, but inside I was in turmoil. I was afraid someone would find out what I had done to get that score. The suspicion in the class spread more and more. The curious gazes and whispers made me feel like I was being exposed in front of the crowd. I didn't dare to look directly at anyone, just lowered my head and focused on my notebook, hoping that time would pass quickly. At that moment, Mr. Noah walked into the class. His appearance made everyone quiet for a moment, but then a few students boldly asked him about the change in my score. He kept his usual serious expression. He slowly explained that when he was grading the test, he accidentally gave some wrong scores, and I was one of the affected cases. He said that after reviewing he realized the mistake and adjusted the results on the system to ensure fairness for everyone. His explanation made the whole class quiet. The whispers stopped. No one had any more doubts. Mr. Noah left after speaking, leaving a quiet atmosphere in the class. I sat there, trying to keep a straight face, but inside I was in turmoil. I knew the truth. I knew that to get that score, I had sacrificed myself. No one in the class knew what had happened between me and the teacher, but that didn't make me feel any better. On the contrary, the guilt, the torment from deep within my mind kept haunting me. Even though the outcome had changed, the price I had to pay was something I could never forget. Every time I thought about it, I just saw myself sliding down a path that I thought I would never go through. From that day on, I started to think a lot about what had happened. I asked myself, was what I did wrong? I knew it wasn't right, but in that situation, I had no other choice. The pressure, fear, and expectations were too great, making me lose my mind. Every time I think back, I feel ashamed and regretful, but at the same time, I tell myself that I will never let this happen again. I started to try harder in my studies. Not for the sake of grades, not to please my parents, but to make up for the guilt in my heart. I wanted to prove that I could achieve good results on my own, without having to rely on wrong methods. Even though that incident was like a stain in my memory, I was determined to turn it into a lesson to become more mature. I always told myself that no matter what the result was, I would never trade myself again. I'm past. The first year of university ended. The exams, final exams, and group projects piled up, making me so busy that I didn't have much time to think about the past. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, that memory reappeared. It was not only an obsession, but also a reminder of my own boundaries, of the values that I needed to uphold. When I returned home for the summer break, everything seemed to be back to normal. My parents were very pleased to hear that I had done well in my first year, and my grades did not disappoint them. They were always proud of me, constantly praising me in front of the neighbors and friends. Our daughter is very good at studying, obedient and hardworking, my mother said, her eyes shining as she talked about me. Those compliments should have made me happy, but they only made me feel heavier. The neighbors also kept exclaiming, "Olivia is so good. The family is so lucky to have such an excellent daughter." My father smiled with satisfaction, proudly showing off my achievements. But they did not know what I had gone through to achieve that. Those compliments were like knives cutting deep into my heart, reminding me of the mistakes I always wanted to forget. During the summer holidays, I tried to keep myself busy. I helped my mother cook, clean the house, and even joined my father in outdoor activities. I wanted to do anything to forget the past, to feel that I was still a valuable person. However, every time I stood in front of the mirror, I still saw a part of me that had changed. I was no longer the innocent, carefree girl I used to be. That incident left a deep mark on me, a valuable lesson that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I decided that I would not let the past haunt me forever. I would try to study better, live up to my values, so that I would never have to bow down to anyone or anything. I cannot change what has happened, but I can choose how to live in the future. And I know that it starts with my own efforts, with the belief that I can do better without any trade-offs. My story ends here, but what I went through will forever serve as a profound lesson, not only to remind me, but also to warn anyone who has ever faced pressure and difficult choices. Looking back, I realize that decisions made in desperation, when one no longer holds true to one's core values, often have serious psychological consequences. I let family pressure, parental expectations, and fear of others' disappointment lead me down a path I never thought I would take. While the end result may have brought some superficial benefits, the price I paid, my self-esteem, my inner peace, and my self-confidence, was much greater. Through this story, I learned a very important thing. Nothing is worth trading your values and your essence. Grades, fame, and recognition from others are only temporary. But once you give up your most important values, it will leave lasting scars on your soul. I understand that, instead of running away or looking for shortcuts, we need to face failure and see it as part of the journey of growth. I also realize that pressure from family and people around us, whether it comes from love or expectation, can sometimes become a burden if we don't know how to manage it. Instead of letting that pressure control me, I learned to communicate and talk to my parents so that they understand that perfection is not always necessary. I realize that they love me for who I am, not for my grades or achievements. From my story, I want to give everyone a piece of advice. Never let pressure, no matter how great, make you do things that go against your values and self-esteem. Learn to face failure and accept that no one is perfect. Life is a long journey, and every stumble is an opportunity for us to grow, not an excuse for us to lose ourselves. If you are feeling overwhelmed, reach out to someone who can listen and share your feelings, whether it is family, friends, or even a trusted teacher. Don't keep it all to yourself until you feel like you have no other choice. Remember, true support never comes with conditions that hurt you. Finally, I hope that my story can serve as a warning to those who find themselves in a similar situation. Believe in yourself and your values. The choices you make today will shape who you will become in the future. So choose the right path, even if it may be the harder path at times. Only by maintaining your identity and self-respect can you truly move forward with ease and peace.